Right, so this is Lord Londonstone back in the heart of London, and specifically back at Westminster Abbey. At the present moment I'm in the Dean's Yard, which is to the south of the Abbey, and many important buildings here. If I pan round, you'll see here over on the right hand side Westminster School. Now, there was a school associated with it, well, ever since the Abbey was built, I should think, going back over many hundreds of years. And of course, abbeys were great centres of learning, as they were throughout the Middle Ages, so it made sense to have a place where the clergy could be taught reading and writing and arithmetic, I suppose, and the sort of elementary material they needed for to preach the gospel and to talk from the Bible. But anyway, here we are. We're in Dean's Yard, and as I say, over the way, Westminster School. Now, the school itself, well, the Abbey was dissolved by Henry VIII in 1540, so the school went with it. It became a cathedral for about, well, for the next, 13 years or so, until the reign of Queen Mary I. She was a Catholic, and so she reopened the building as an abbey, but it only remained open as an abbey for the following sort of 5 years of her reign. After that, it was taken over by Queen Elizabeth I when she came to the throne in 1558. And they didn't know quite what to do with it, so they called it the Collegiate Church of St. Peter in Westminster, which means to say that it is neither an abbey nor a cathedral, but it is a church which is dedicated to the functions of the British monarchy, for things like coronations and so forth, and other special occasions, weddings, funerals. The funeral of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was held in the Abbey, and the wedding of Prince William to Catherine Middleton in 2011. But anyway, after the dissolution of the Abbey, people called out because the dissolution of the school, so Queen Elizabeth reopened the school in 1560, and many distinguished people have been students at Westminster School. These people include Hakluyt, I hope that's how you pronounce his name. He was a great explorer. Who else did we have? We had Sir Christopher Wren, the man who designed St. Paul's Cathedral, John Locke, the philosopher, Ben Jonson, who was a poet and a playwright, and a great contemporary of William Shakespeare. Now, he's actually buried in the Abbey, and he's buried vertically for some extraordinary reason, I don't know quite what, but anyway. Who else did we have? We had, I think I've told you about John Locke, Edward Gibbon, the historian, the man who wrote the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Coming towards more recent times, we have Sir Peter Ustinov, the great actor, Louis Theroux, the broadcaster, Benjamin Yeo, the novelist, and who else did we have behind that? We had Alfred Enoch, who was an actor who featured in the Harry Potter films. Anyway, what I'll do now is just turn on to other things you need to see. Here we have Church House, and Church House is the administrative headquarters. I'll come in as the shade out of the sun. There we have it, the administrative headquarters of the Church of England. And right above the doorway you have a Greek inscription, He basileia toi theoi entos humon estin, which translated from the Koine Greek into English is the kingdom of God is within you. So there it is, plain for everyone to read up in Church House. Okay, let's move on from here. What we'll do is make our way towards and talk a bit about the abbeys, because the abbey itself, like all the other abbeys in this country, had an enormous impact on the economic development of England throughout the Middle Ages. I said the abbeys were centres of learning. They were also more in the practical crafts. Because the abbeys acquired great tracts of land, it was necessary for the monks to become to deal with things like forestry, land management, animal husbandry and so forth. They managed these farms and they were very good at it. The population of Europe rose steadily from about, I think it was from about the year 650. There was just under 20 million people living in Europe, and by the next 400 years that had risen to 40 million, and it went up above 70 million by the year 1340. In 1348 we had the Black Death, which decimated a great deal of Europe, which obviously had a terrible impact on the size of the population, but it just shows, as I say, the monks, the abbeys collectively had a tremendous impact on the economy. And I say it wasn't only in agriculture. There were the arts and crafts and the skills that were practiced here that then went on to be taught to secular people. For instance, the earliest architects, the people who built the abbey, would have been monks, but they then passed over these skills to masons. And so I say we have to take into consideration, I say, how much the abbeys did rather than just pray, just as a religious order. Now, of course, this created a tension because the abbeys had originally been originally established for the purpose of religious contemplation, but inevitably the monks became more interested in their secular affairs. So that's why you had a number of places, not only around Europe, the Cluniacs and the Cistercians, who tried to get back to the original rule of St. Benedict. With the coming, oh yes, actually that's worth having a look at. Those at the top there, you can see. Anyway, I'm making my way outside of the Abbey at the moment, outside Dean's Yard, and I'm coming up to the front of the Abbey. So I was just saying, yes, that collectively the Abbeys had an enormous impact on economic development in Europe. They created the arts and crafts and the agriculture that was needed to feed the population. They brought in the three-field system for planting crops. In other words, they'd have 2 fields every year. They would just change them around, so it gave the land opportunity to rest for a year and replenish its strength. Now then, just round here, as I say, we're coming out to the front of the building, and as we do that, you'll see here, ladies and gentlemen, this monument was set up to commemorate the deaths of those who had been taught at Westminster School and who perished in the Crimean War of 1854 and 1855, and also in the Indian Mutiny of 1857. Okay, look round here, you've got Methodist Central Hall, we've seen that already, and what I want to do now is just show you we're at one end of Victoria Street, and the street round here over on the left hand side, if you follow it all the way along, will take you up to Victoria Station. But anyway, we don't really want to go all that far, do we? So what I'll do is swing round again so we get another look at this site, which I think you've seen before in other videos, but it's always worth having a second look at it. You've got the Abbey, and within the Abbey you have things like the earliest portrait of King Richard II, who lived at the end of the 1300s. You also have the coronation chair in which the king or queen sits when they're being crowned. It was built for the purpose of accommodating the Stone of Scone, which was taken from the Scots by Edward I, but it was returned to the Scottish people in the 1990s. But it's brought down every now and then whenever they have things like whenever they have a coronation. But in the Abbey of course, after it ceased to be an abbey, we still call it the Abbey. There's no point asking directions for the Collegiate Church of St. Peter in Westminster, because nobody will know what you're talking about. You'll notice, of course, I think I've said this before, you've got the towers that were added in 1743, but the towers are still designed in Gothic architecture, which is a medieval style, but obviously they wanted the towers to blend in with the medieval style, so that's why they're there, although they were put up very much later. Gothic architecture varies from one country to the other, so you have French Gothic, and you have English Gothic, German Gothic, Spanish Gothic, and so forth. It's typical with an English abbey or cathedral that you have a very flat front with one very large window over a very small doorway. That is typical of English cathedrals and abbeys. You don't see them in every single cathedral and abbey, but as I take you round here, you will see something rather different with the entrance to the northern transept. So here I am. Right, so within the abbey, it's a bit of a lumber room now. It's really our national mausoleum, so we have over 3,000 people who are buried here, and that includes 19 kings and queens, starting from Henry III, who was the man who built the present structure. You also have Edward I, Edward III, Richard II. So you've got, as I say, 19 kings and queens. You also have other people who are buried here. Sir Isaac Newton, the great scientist. Charles Darwin, also another great scientist, a man who revolutionized our thought about our relationship with the rest of the living world. We have great literary figures such as Charles Dickens and Alfred Lord Tennyson, and also great musicians such as Purcell and Handel. Now, if you're going into the Abbey, nowadays you have to come round here. I'll show you where. Just round here. There's a little announcement saying at the present moment they're full, so they won't let you in without a ticket. But you can have, there's a QR code. I presume you'll have to go to the website in order to get a ticket. There you are. So this is the way in, and you might like just to have a quick look at the visiting time. So what it does is it opens Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 9:30, 9 o'clock on Saturday, and then it closes 3:30 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and 3 o'clock on Saturday. Of course, on Sundays, the building is used for the purpose for which it was constructed, which is to say religious worship. You can, of course, join, if you wish to do so, in the religious worship, but the sites which are interesting from the tourist point of view will, of course, be roped off and out of bounds. So, we'll just head round here. Make our way around to the northern entrance, or the entrance on the northern transept. And the other thing I really want to point out to you as we go down here are the flying buttresses that I talked about in the previous video. As I said, the whole point about a flying buttress was that it supported the roof. In fact, they took most of the weight of the roof, and that meant you could have relatively thin walls with wide open windows to allow light into the building. There's no spire on Westminster Abbey. Sir Christopher Wren, who was the surveyor for this building way back in the 1600s, wanted to add a spire, but for some reason, whatever reason, he never quite got round to doing that. So it's a bit of a shame. The other thing down here, you'll see directly in front of me is the Church of St Margaret in Westminster. Now, a church was built here in the 1100s, but at that time there was quite a community that had gathered around the building, secular people of course, and they needed their own church, and they had to have their own church because they weren't allowed to worship inside the abbey, where it was thought they might distract the devotions of the monks, so they had to have their own church. Since 1614, St Margaret's has been the parish church of the House of Commons. St Margaret of Antioch is one of the 14 holy helpers. There were 14 special saints in the Middle Ages who helped people throughout the sort of everyday experiences of life, and Margaret helped women in childbirth. Anyway, as I was saying, this church became the parish church of the House of Commons, and in fact a number of important people have been married here. Samuel Pepys, the diarist, was married here in 1655. John Milton, the poet, a year later, 1666. And Sir Winston Churchill was married here in 1908. Buried here we have William Caxton, or somewhere, we don't know exactly where, possibly underneath the turf or in the building, it's not entirely clear. But William Caxton was the man who built the first printing press in 1473, I think. I'll check that out, but I think I'm right, it's about that time. He was the man who started the printing industry in England, and he's buried here. And also buried here is Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, Sir Walter Raleigh was a very popular man in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, and in 1585 he sailed across the Atlantic to establish the colony of Roanoke in what is now the colony of the state of North Carolina, one of the states of the United States of America. He came to a bad end, did Sir Walter Raleigh. He was beheaded not very far from here in Old Palace Yard on trumped up charges, and I say they buried his body up by the high altar. I'm just turning around here to show you the entrance to the building, and what is actually rather striking about this is that this is an example of French architecture. Now, if you go to France, you'll see that many of the cathedrals have these deeply recessed doorways, and they also have rose windows like that. The one that you see here, a circular window with sort of radiating spokes, rather like a bicycle wheel. That is not a typical feature of English architecture, that is French architecture, and it shows the French influence on the design of this building. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, some more information for you about Westminster Abbey. I hope you find that helpful and useful, or you might even find it entertaining, I don't know. But what I would be really appreciative of is your leaving a comment down to tell me what you've appreciated or what you like about these videos, and anything that you think is tedious and boring that I should go on and do something else. It's just useful to get some sort of feedback from you, ladies and gentlemen, so I just invite you to leave your comments below. In the meantime, I shall say over and out, and I will see you all in the next video.